Welcome to day 11 in the 12 Days of Christmas Cards series. This is Elena with Black Sheep 303 Creative, and today's project I have dubbed the Distress Ink Forest. I have used multiple colors of distress ink along with a stencil and a mask to create this lovely aspen or birch forest, depending on where you live in the country. In my area, it would be an aspen forest, since I am in Colorado. So to start off, I have a 6x6 piece of inexpensive watercolor paper. For whatever reason, distress inks seem to work well with inexpensive paper, so that's what I'm using today. And then there's that 6x6 mini Aspen stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. And then I will be using this moon mask from the Clarity Stamp Landscape Mask Set. I'm going to be layering the moon behind the stencil when I put on my night sky. However, first I am going to start off by laying down a base coat of sort of gray tones that will work as the color for the tree trunks as well as the moon once we remove the stencil after the night sky has been put in, so that will have some color to it and it won't just be white. I'm going to use that color later to create the tree trunks in front of the moon that will be blank after the stencil's removed, and also to just add some tone to the tree trunks that will eventually wind up being darker than the moon in the end. So for this base coat, I am using pumice stone, weathered wood, and hickory smoke. I am not attempting to get any kind of a smooth blend. I am really just kind of sticking it on there to really just get a base coat going. In the end, you will not see any of this, at least not with any distinction. So it really doesn't matter how it looks at this stage. And now I'm going to lay down the mask and the stencil, and I'm going to begin the major watercoloring for this, which is putting in the night sky. So my favorite way of blending the night sky for distress inks or color combination is Blueprint Sketch, which is what I am starting with here, which is a fairly vivid blue, although it's a darker blue, but it does lay down a really nice blue color for a sky. And then I move on to Chip Sapphire, Dusty Concord, and Black Soot. Now, something to note about this stencil is that it is incredibly detailed. So the blending tool did like to sort of pick up on some of those areas where the lines have been cut into the trees and mess with the plastic, but I did okay just by holding it down with my hand and my fingers just to keep all those little branches and those pieces in place as I blended over them. So you can see now I'm adding in the Blueprint Sketch the Chip Sapphire on top of the Blueprint Sketch, and it's darkening up the sky. And hopefully you can tell that I am leaving a bit of a halo around the moon. Now I did go all the way up to the mask for the moon with the Blueprint Sketch, but with the Chip Sapphire, I leave a little bit of a halo of that Blueprint Sketch. And now I'm adding the Dusty Concord, which is adding in a nice purpley hue. But again, I am staying further out from the moon to enhance that sort of lit halo effect in the end. And finally, this is the last color, Black Soot, which really works to darken up the sky. And again, I'm moving further away from the moon, and you'll see when we start removing the stencil what that does to the lighting of the moon. Now we've got a big blank space where the moon was, so I need to fill that in. So I've taken my flat brush here and just some clean water, and I've connected the trunks below the moon to the ones above the moon that I can see from the stencil. And since we've got that base coat down, the clean water just kind of pushes the color away and creates more like a light space so I can actually see where those trunks are as I continue on. Now I'm also doing the same thing to add some branches. And finally I decide I'm just going to go with some hickory smoke to add in the branches to gray them down, because all the branches are pretty detailed. I am kind of glancing at the stencil off to the side to sort of get a feel for where the branches are on the stencil. However, I'm really just kind of winging this in front of the moon. I don't try to reproduce the stencil exactly. It would just be impossible. It's so detailed. It would be way too time consuming. So I was really just kind of going for the feel of that branchy effect in front of the moon along with the tree trunks themselves. Now, when you think about it, if the trees are in front of the moon, the tree trunks themselves are going to be much darker than the moon. So I am darkening up the tree trunks with hickory smoke. I want to get and that's part of the reason I laid down that base layer, was so that we kind of already started with a gray tone, and the water tends to activate that. And then when I add additional hickory smoke on top of it, it just kind of layers it and makes it darker. So I'm taking my large brush and just drawing in the trunks. And now I'm taking my detail brush, and really I'm just going almost directly to that. I am really directly on the hickory smoke pad just to get a fair amount of color and to really draw in these little delicate branches, and trying to connect some of them to the trees and work with the other branches that you see that the stencil has created to the outer portions of the moon. Now here I've kind of darkened all the trunks, and I've added in a lot of the little line details on the tree trunks themselves. And so I'm just going to finish that up here. And I did that by combining Dusty Concord and Chipped Sapphire together with some water. And I take my detail brush and I just kind of add them onto the trunks. Now, some of them I was tightening up the lines that were left from the stencil. And then I added additional ones on top of them just to kind of create some additional detailing on those trees. Now, to really, really darken up the trees, I take my black soot and a fair amount of water, and I am adding additional shadows to the insides of the trunks. I'm trying to create sort of a halo effect on the trees. So if the moon's behind them, the light's coming from behind, the edges are going to be lighter, and then the insides are going to be darker. So by adding the black soot and really darkening down the centers of the trunks, I'm getting some of that effect. And then as the trees move away from the moon, like the tree on the left, the right-hand side is going to be lighter, and then the rest of the trunk is going to be darker just from the way it's being lit from behind. So I take the black soot and I'm adding in sort of those shadowy details to the various trunks, and then I will take my little detail brush and do the exact same thing with the branches. And this helps to connect the branches to specific trees, because right now they're kind of just a big gray mess, but adding the black soot helps to, make them, that branch goes to that tree and that branch goes to that tree. And then also by how I lighten them or darken them, some come forward, some go back, and it just helps to blend the entire look of the branches in with the trunks that have now been darkened up quite a bit. So once I finish up with the branches, that is essentially the watercoloring for this painting. Now I wanted to create a major snowstorm on top of this painting. So how I do that is with some white acrylic paint, some water, and a toothbrush, and my splatter box. So this is an 18 by 24 cardboard box that I lay on its side. And then I take my toothbrush and dip it in water and mix it into the paint and then splatter it. Now I normally splatter off first, because when I first initially load the toothbrush, the splatters tend to be pretty large and misshapen and more than this little piece of artwork can handle. But I do this multiple times over and over to get enough splatters on this to create a real snowy effect. My craft room is fairly small, so the box helps to contain the mess, because it does get very messy, as you can see from the edges of the box. But this is also the best method I have found for creating larger droplets on anything, really. I have struggled with getting the right size of snowflakes on numerous pieces, and this really works. The toothbrush method works very, very well. Occasionally I will get a larger lump, but I just wipe that off and it creates a lighter spot, but I can fix it as I am fixing these ones now, you will see. So I've cut this down to a 5x5, and it's going to be mounted onto that 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 navy cardstock card base. So to fix these sort of misshapen areas and any lighter areas, I am taking the same white acrylic paint, except this time it's directly out of the bottle. You can't see it, but it's up there on my craft mat right above the artwork. And I'm taking the handle end of a thin paintbrush and I'm dipping it in the paint, and then I don't know, what would we call it? I'm tapping it onto the snowflakes. So the nice thing about the handle is if it's fairly small, you can get really tiny dots, you can get medium-sized dots, and you can get bigger dots if you just kind of move it around in a circular motion to fill in existing dots. Now I will use this to lighten up any dots that have kind of faded out from too much water in the paint. Sometimes they become discolored because if there's a lot of water, it will mix with the distress inks on the watercolor paper and it just kind of looks odd. And sometimes they're just kind of, the splatters are not, they don't look good. They're sort of a weird shape. So I fix them with this paint method. The other nice thing about this is that it creates some depth of field to the snowstorm. So the splatters themselves are, some are lighter, some are darker, some are bigger, some are smaller. It depends on how much water was on the toothbrush at the time that I splattered it. So some of them really fade out and some of them are stronger. But by adding or touching up certain ones with this bright white paint, it pulls those snowflakes forward and the rest of them kind of recede backwards. So it looks as though it is snowing all the way back through this deep forest. Those bright white ones look like they're right in the front and right in front of you as the viewer. And then the lighter ones recede and look as though they are further back in the forest. I hope that makes sense. But I really like that about this method, and it does a really nice job of adding some depth of field to the snowstorm. Now to complete this, I am just adding a silver bow and some ribbon to the front of this. I'm not the greatest bow tower, but I do get it eventually and get it positioned correctly. And my favorite trick for securing bows to cards is to take a little mini glue dot and stick it behind the bow itself, which secures the knot in place and also secures the bow in place. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just taking my little scissors and squishing up the mini glue dot and sticking it behind the bow and trimming off my ribbon. And now I will adhere the entire thing down to the front of the card base with my A2G gun, which works well on the cheap watercolor paper for some reason, not on others. And that is the completed card. And hopefully in some of these shots, you'll be able to see that depth of field with the snow that I'm talking about and how some fade away and some come forward. I think this card could be great as a thank you card at Christmas. It's also a great Christmas card. But it also could just be a winter card or, any number of occasions that occurred during winter. It is a little more labor intensive. However, it creates a beautiful result. And if you haven't tried watercoloring with distress inks, it is a great way to start. They blend very easily and it's perfect for beginners. So thanks so much for watching. There's only one day left in the Christmas card series. I hope you will join me tomorrow and check out the links below for the additional videos as well as the supply list for this project.